Story 1. The Florida citrus industry, specifically oranges, is facing a challenge. There is a fungus spreading and infecting groves across the state. Unfortunately, there is no way to kill the fungus. The only solution is to cut down all citrus trees within a certain radius of an infected tree. Many farmers are choosing to sell their farms rather than trying to start all over. Story 2. The Rio Grande levees in El Paso's Upper Valley are old and need repair, and will fail in a major flood. The low-lying suburbs in the Upper Valley were recently deemed to be in a Federal Emergency Management Agency floodplain. Story 3. Factual information on the internet. There's a churn of artificial intelligence-created content that's being taken as fact and used as the basis for new articles and content. Sifting through information to validate it is already too much effort for many and will only become more difficult. Story 4. Publicly traded companies constantly communicate the message, "We did well but not great. Expect more revenue next quarter. Oh, that was good but not great. Anticipate even more revenue next quarter." In the 4 years I've been with my company, my production quota has tripled, and it's unsustainable. Every quarter must generate more revenue than the last. Otherwise, it's considered failing. This scenario is true for almost every single publicly traded company. Corners are being cut, profits maximized, and employees compromised. It's a cycle that keeps on happening. Story 5. The young childcare industry has seen increased regulation to make facilities safer, which is a very positive development. However, this had the unintended consequence of increasing costs for owners. Now, more teachers with training and certification are needed, not to mention the patience and stamina to work with young children all day. The pay is comparable to fast food, but without the benefits. Owners have to find a way to pay teachers enough to retain them while keeping costs down so that parents can afford to send their children. It's almost impossible without an infusion of government investments. Story 6. Literally all infrastructure in North America, the majority of underground infrastructure such as pipes, water lines, and sewer systems, has been completely ignored in terms of maintenance and has been totally ignored in terms of budgeting for replacing the assets. There are towns that are facing upcoming bills of tens to hundreds of millions, not even mentioning larger cities, that have saved approximately 0% of the required amount by constantly pushing out the lifetime estimation of the assets. Lots and lots of bills are coming due shortly if the engineering estimates are accurate, and very few towns have saved anything for this scenario. We're basically living in a world where no one wants to be the person to say that we need to save money for long-term planning, and instead, everyone hopes things don't fail while they are leading, and they can pass the buck. Story 7. The Ogallala Aquifer. You know how Kansas and Nebraska are known for essentially being endless fields of wheat and corn? Well, they do that by drilling wells to one of the world's largest aquifers deep under the Midwest. There isn't enough consistent rainfall in those areas for all those crops, so well water makes up the difference. But we're draining it and it can't be replenished. Once it's drained, it's Dust Bowl 2.0, and no more large-scale farming in the Midwest. Story 8. The Garisenda, one of 2 remaining 12th century towers in Bologna, Italy. I saw them in April. They look pretty ridiculous, to be honest. The area is blocked off by some shipping containers because that tower is probably going to fall any day. It looks like there are some half-hearted restoration attempts happening, but there's no clear plan. Story 9. Lots of things, according to a discussion on Reddit about societal collapse. Personally, I live in a city called Lowell, Massachusetts, and there's the Rourke Bridge built 40 years ago that was meant to be temporary. Honestly, it reminds me of those horrible, scary bridges you've seen over rivers in Siberia or some other place in Central Asia. It's loud and bumpy, and you can feel the whole thing sway because it gets 25,000 cars crossing it every day. Not only that, but you can actually walk under it since there's a river walk pathway it connects to, and you can see rusted sections just rotting away. About 6 months ago, a truck crossed it and a panel on the surface somehow seesawed up into the gas tank. The truck made it across, but not before losing probably 80 to 100 gallons of diesel onto the bridge and into the river below. The river had a marshy, swampy area near the bridge, and you could see the fuel slick eddying and collecting into that area. I can't imagine much survived underneath. I'm sure a lot of fish eggs and small aquatic animals died down there. The city state, and federal authorities have known this bridge needs replacing for decades, and they know about the rust and rot. But they continue to say that it will last for now. Don't they always say that, though? There is a plan to make a new one next to it, but it won't be done until 2028, which we all know means it'll probably drag on into 2029, 2030, etc. I honestly don't think it will last that long. Story 10. Without human intervention, your local energy grid is only about 6 to 24 hours away from complete collapse, depending on how much the utility company relies on automatic backups. The electricity grid will likely fail first, and within hours. Other energy sources like city heat or natural gas will take longer because those depend less on active human inputs. You remember in the Last of Us TV show how Nick Offerman is in a Home Depot? The power goes out, and he remarks, "That was fast?" That bit was much more accurate than anyone not involved in utilities would ever care to know. Story 11. The food chain. I'm still amazed no one is talking about the fact that insect biomass has declined by approximately 47% and abundance declined by approximately 61.5% over the last 35 years. In some areas, it's measured 75% decline in a single generation. This insect apocalypse is very bad. Don't just take my word for it. Indeed, most biologists agree that the world has entered its sixth mass extinction event, the first since the end of the Cretaceous period 66 million years ago, when more than 80% of all species, including the non-avian dinosaurs, perished. Story 12. There's a waste product of burning coal called fly ash. We use it in concrete. It makes the concrete better and cheaper. Nobody is building new coal power plants, and old ones are shutting down. It's getting harder and harder to source the ash. If we have to source it from far away, like China, the transportation costs erase the cost saving. We can get the same concrete with just cement and added chemicals, but it's more expensive. In 10 years, we probably won't be using it at all. It's a really minor thing that will have far-reaching consequences. Architects and engineers will probably look at ways to reduce concrete in their buildings as the costs increase. It's not likely to impact residential, but big downtown architecture is sure to be affected. Story 13. We are losing bees at an alarming rate. As far as important species go, they are at the top of the list. They are critical pollinators. They pollinate 70 of the approximately 100 crop species that feed 90% of the world. Honeybees are responsible for $30 billion a year in crops. When the bees are gone, we will shortly follow. Story 14. A lot of subscription services, not just streaming services, I'm talking about the big corporate software subscriptions. I work in tech, and there's a very real panic going on at a lot of these companies because they built their entire network and service at a loss, funneled hundreds of thousands of investor dollars into a product with the idea that they would raise the price later and make it all back after getting a foothold. But here's the thing, the cost of running a live service program is much higher than just selling a license and letting people install the program and use it locally. You need servers, you need virtual machines, not to mention the person-hours difference between occasional software updates of regular software and a live service. So not only do they have to pay back that loss leading, they also need to make enough to keep up with running the service. They get in and they spread as far as they can. They reach every possible customer, they do what they planned on, and jack the price now that they have dedicated users, but it's not enough. There just aren't enough customers to ever actually make the money needed to pay back their loans and run the company. Either your product is too niche or there's too much competition, or in some cases you are literally selling to every potential customer, and it's still not enough to pay back your lost leads. And by the time they realize this, they can try raising prices, but at this point, some other company is going to be in the lose money, get customers phase doing the same thing you are, and if you raise the price again this quickly, you're going to breach the trust thermocline, and the customers you do have are going to jump ship and you'll make even less money. A lot of companies jumped on the software as a service train that was so successful for Microsoft and Adobe, but the thing is, they already had a lot of money to throw at projects. They could loss lead and just eat the losses. Smaller companies don't have that luxury. But they made it seem so lucrative and easy that thousands of companies are slowly hemorrhaging themselves to death trying to replicate it. Story 15. Internet security involves both keeping our information safe and keeping the internet lights on. Some predict that a 24-hour worldwide shutdown could be cataclysmic, and this whole system is being held up by toothpicks. Story 16. The Los Angeles court reporter system along with many other county services like the health department, has faced significant challenges. Additionally, several county IT systems have been affected. Court reporters began working from home in 2020, and most of them just never returned. There is such a high demand for court reporters that starting salaries have reached $100,000 a year, along with signing bonuses. However, they still cannot hire enough qualified individuals. This situation has become a critical issue because court reporters play a vital role in the justice system in Los Angeles. Many courts do not accept electronic recordings as accurate portrayals of court discussions. While some probate and misdemeanor courts do allow them, all other courts require a court reporter. If a judge rules against an individual, a properly created court transcript is essential for appealing the decision. Unfortunately, in many instances, these transcripts are no longer being provided, and cases cannot be indefinitely delayed. Without a transcript, there is no opportunity to appeal. No appeal option results in serious constitutional violations. Story 17. Well, topsoil is getting extremely depleted. What used to be yards deep, fertile soil is down to inches, washed or blown away due to agriculture and irrigation. Story 18. A month ago, I was at my grandparents' house. For an inheritance issue, they called an architect. The first thing he told them is that they can no longer live in the house because it is at risk of collapse. That night, nobody slept. Story 19. The fourth grader's little black market that they run from the girls' bathroom. I'm close to getting the kingpin. Nothing will get past this teacher. Update. Since some have asked, they sell Pokemon cards, pencils, snacks, and even sunglasses. I love that my students are quick enough to sell, but they have been guilty of price gouging. I want them to be driven but not to be thieves. Story 20. The education system we have may only last another 10 more years before a whole section of teachers retires, and then we will be absolutely in trouble. 50% of teachers quit within the first 5 years, and that statistic is much higher for special education teachers. We are not going to have anyone to work in the schools. Get ready for your children to be taught by an online program with a person who supervises 50 kids at one time and has no training. It is going to get bad fast, even faster in states with poor union support. And if you have a child with a lot of support needs, truly, I do not know what they will do. I work with that population, and we are currently missing 2 teachers, and 3 others are on emergency permits. It is a huge problem and keeps getting worse because the pay is so bad that no one wants to work with these students. I went to the hospital on Friday from a bite from a student, truly a manifestation of his disability, who desperately needs a 2-to-1 ratio, but the district is making it impossible. I barely get to teach because I am putting out fires all day. Story 21. Chrysler Dodge. Many dealers can't get rid of all their 2023 models from last year still sitting on the lot. Time to resurrect the K-car. It saved them in the 80s, and it can do it again. Story 22. The Colorado River's water levels are consistently dropping and doing so quickly. The Hoover Dam eventually won't be able to generate electricity. There's so much that relies on the Colorado, and eventually it's all going to fall apart. So much farming, several major cities, tens of millions of people. They're either going to have to relocate or start importing water from elsewhere. On top of that, 53% of aquifers in the United States are losing water. Story 23. Information technology knowledge. There are several factors at work here. Colleges are mostly a few years behind trends, if not more. So a lot of recent graduates are way behind from the start. Most colleges are now just shills for business licenses called degrees. You need this license to be allowed to have an entry job, and they know it, so they charge whatever the market can bear. Pearson VUE has seized a huge amount of this space, which just adds to the cost, and tries to enforce certification tracks with government contract specifications and all sorts of inroads. The cash cow of graduating college with 6-figure jobs waiting for them is mostly gone. The junior roles have been outsourced overseas and have been replaced with people wearing multiple hats. There are very few middle roles. So the track of going from junior to senior has a huge gap that keeps getting wider. The senior roles are starting to age out. Many went into management and some are retiring. Knowledge and experience are getting lost. Companies reliant on technology to survive are cutting technology costs as a cost center because of the pressure of rising capitalism always producing value year to year. Thus, they send more jobs overseas, and senior roles become too costly to maintain. We are incurring a lot of debt in aging infrastructure, and IT is no different. There are systems operating high-cost operations in factories, transportation, and utilities that haven't been upgraded in decades, and some of the people who knew how it all worked are dying off. Eventually, there won't be enough senior roles to teach younger people anything, and there will be a cascading series of knowledge gaps in current infrastructure, leading to huge failures. People say that kids today know computers, but they really don't. Most only know the graphical user interface and how to operate an iPad, not what makes the iPad work under the hood or how the internet works.